We had one stereo in the house, and we all liked music. Even with Kiss, we had one copy, like a house copy. You have to understand, this was in the 70s. My dad was a bank teller. He had 4 preteen or teenage boys that ate everything in sight and were always getting into trouble. We were always growing out of our clothes, so there wasn't much money to go around. But they always did their best. I remember bringing our copy of Alive to elementary school for show and tell. My mom had actually written Koller on the cover in pen so no one would steal it. I was ready to play it, and my best friend, Jerry Cooney, not the boxer, says, "Play Black Diamond." So I played it, and Jerry got up on a desk and just threw a chair across the room because it made him go crazy. I vividly remember this. I was laughing so hard, but I was also in awe of the power of music, thinking, wow, this music is driving people crazy. Our teacher made me shut it off, screaming, "Don't you ever bring that back to school ever again!" I was like, wow, music is crazy.
Well, your friend threw a chair. No wonder she made you leave it at home from then on. There would be times where my parents would be in the living room watching TV, and the stereo was in there too, so you had to sit there with your headphones on, listening to the radio or your albums. I'd sit there, have one leg up on my knee, listening away, and my dad would come over and kick my foot off my knee. He'd kick you out of your trance. I remember him coming downstairs one day, and he was like, "Yeah, I listened to your Kiss record, and what's with that song? And she took off her clothes." And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, Dad. That's just a record.
He did always have good one-liners. When I got into the shaved head phase, he was like, "What is this? Is this the new uniform you kids are wearing?" At the time, I had Doc Martens on and a shaved head, all that. I'd gone from the long hair costume to the shaved head costume.
Yeah, I thought I had cool spiky hair, but when I saw a picture of myself, I looked more like Robert Smith from The Cure than Sid Vicious. And I was like, wow, I look like a Robert Smith. Once we were into the hardcore scene for a while and had been going to shows for a number of years, I started to see a hypocrisy in the punk kids as far as image goes. They all wanted to be different, but they all dressed the same. And they wouldn't like your band unless you looked punk or hardcore. So we were like, let's just look like Queen's Guidos and see what happens. That's where our Rat Tails came in. They're famous now.
Yeah, hardcore became a very big thing for us, obviously. I think what really got us going was meeting Armand at Francis Lewis High School. We were kind of like long-haired guys with Iron Maiden patches, Motorhead patches, and this guy comes into school with his hair down to his waist, wearing an upside-down cross. And we were like, this guy's got to be down with us.
And he was. Through him, we met Vic Venom from Reagan Youth, and they turned us on to Venom. I also remember Armand playing Negative Approach for us, and I was like, amazing. They introduced us to all these great bands from England, and they told us about the great scene going on in New York. We discovered the New York hardcore scene from that. Armand Majidi, sick of it all drummer.
There were 2 guys who introduced me to tons of metal and hardcore punk stuff. One was Ricky Beckel, who later played in EXE and Bile, and the other was Dan Monahan, who went to my high school. Dan was full-on into metal and took me to my first shows. Ricky played me the first hardcore record I'd really heard, which was the first Necro 7-inch. Hearing that made me realize that hardcore was even more aggressive than metal. It wasn't as heavy or full-sounding, and the production was raw, but I loved it. I mean, back then, there were no well-produced hardcore records. Then I met Vic Venom and a guy named Bill Hepper. There was a whole cast of characters at Francis Lewis into aggressive music.
The only people we hung out with were people into Motorhead and stuff like that, and it was a progression into faster, heavier stuff. Then it became tangible stuff, bands we could actually go see. We went to Lemoore in Brooklyn, we went to Lemoore's East in Queens, and of course, we couldn't get in because we were too young. But when we eventually did get in, it was like, wow, there's bands on stage. But somehow the band still felt untouchable. Metal shows were always different that way.
Although, when we first went to see Motorhead at Lemoore's East, Lemmy was just walking down the street by himself and then hanging out at the bar. Not that you could really bother him, but he was so cool all the time. Back then, we would hang out after shows by the backstage door to try and meet the bands. When Venom first played in Staten Island in 1983, we went right to the backstage door and just hung out there. We were sitting there, and this guy sits next to me and goes, "So, you like Venom?" And it was Cliff Burton from Metallica.
To keep listening to this audiobook for free, click the link in the description. It will take you to a free Audible trial where you can listen to this and many other books for free for 30 days.